As the 2024 NFL season unfolds, Russell Wilson is out there proving his doubters wrong. Yes, even the legendary Terry Bradshaw, who is proving the late, great Hollywood Henderson right. He can't spell cat if you spotted him, the C and the T. Rest in peace, Hollywood. It's also becoming increasingly clear why these armchair critics, Ben Roethlisberger, aren't coaching in the league. After all, if they were any good, they'd be on the sidelines instead of spouting nonsense from the comfort of their network studio or couch. And a delightful twist of irony, Patriots defensive tackle Christian Barmore has decided to apologize for playing the race car during a recent traffic stop. Who knew accountability could be so refreshing? Maybe he should give a masterclass on how to own up to your mistakes because we could all use a little more honesty these days. Meanwhile, Patriots head coach Gerard Mayo is taking heat for calling his players soft. Really, Gerard? Maybe it's time to look in the mirror and acknowledge that coaching might be the real issue here. After all, Bill Belichick, despite being a horrid offensive mind, had that defensive unit solid last season. Perhaps it's not them. Maybe it's you. And in Cleveland, Deshaun Watson's future as an NFL starter looks about as bright as a blackout. His Achilles tear might just mark the end of his franchise quarterback days. And Jameis Winston defending Watson, whoo, that's a win nobody asked for. With Winston's own sordid past toward women, his support feels less like solidarity and more like a poorly timed joke. So let's get down to it, my fellow armchair quarterbacks, for another episode of Points on the Board, where sports and politics intersect and we don't hold back. Hello, everybody. This is William Del Pilar. This is Points on the Board, and I'm joined here with my co-host, Mr. Bill Ross, who is back from a family emergency. It's great to have him back. I was prepared to go solo, but it's always much more fun to have somebody. I just wish Bill was uglier, so I could be the good-looking guy. So before we start, Bill, let me let the audience know, please share and like this podcast as well as subscribe to it. And you can find this podcast and others like it at grumblingsmedia.com, as well as our social media platforms, Rumble, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, y Pandora, under the handle Grumblings Media. So let's get right on into it, Mr. Bill. How was Bill? So Bill is working on a clip that we pushed back twice now. And it has to do with college teams traveling to the East Coast from the West Coast. And we all know how that works for professional NFL. It tends to have the West Coast team losing. But Bill's been tracking this. And just in a few seconds here, how's it been going so far? Because now that you're back and you have time, you're going to do the short or the clip on it. But
right.
Give us a teaser here. How's that going?
Well, so teaser is interesting. So I've been looking at the Big Ten because obviously they've expanded coast to coast, and anybody who's traveled 2 time zones, the record overall in the league is 4-12, right? And my take on it is the Big Ten plays a lot of day games, so you have a lot of noon East Coast start games. And that's very difficult for a West Coast team who's not coming in all that, one day before the game, and they're getting up and playing at noon, which is 9 a.m. for them. So I think the Big Ten briefly has to change their start times, but we'll go into that. That's a tease on that. And then also my school, Texas El Paso, used to be in the Western Athletic Conference, and we were the most traveled conference at that time, but we were also regional, right? And right. If you look at the Texas El Pasos, in the last 25 games to the East Coast, they're 3-25. Wow. So yeah, and there's some start times and some different issues there, but it's just hard to travel like that because you travel on a Friday, you walk through Friday afternoon, you wake up and you're playing your game on Saturday. So we'll get into more detail on that, but it's really very interesting, and it's a big problem in college athletics with all this expansion.
People, maybe Bill's just a homer. He's lying to cover for the fact his team isn't very good.
Well, they're not good this year. We were when I was there, but they're not good right now.
So I had no clue. I just had to take that jab.
Well, yeah, they're all right. Thanks, William. Yeah, that's great.
Okay. So let's get into it here real quick, and we're gonna have fun this episode. It probably is gonna be slightly shorter than an hour, is my take, because it's some general topics. But there's topics. They are topics that you all out there are talking about, and Bill and I wanted to give our 2 cents. First on tap is Mr. Deshaun Watson. As we all know, he suffered a season-ending ruptured Achilles during a game against the Cincinnati Bengals. And I'm not going to show the video, Bill, but at first I'm trying to look at it really, really hard, and then I saw the blow up. And what happened is it's kind of like the rubber band effect. When that band pops, the Achilles was like jelly, or I'm sorry, the calf was like jelly because there was nothing attached to it. A friend of mine said, "Man, that's pretty brutal." And my take was that looks pretty standard for it's just that's a devastating injury. And in fact, some people have contemplated, and I haven't seen any studies, but I'm sure they're out there, that it's harder now to come back from an Achilles tendon than a torn ACL, because the technology is so good in repairing the torn ACLs versus the dealing with the scar tissue, the importance of that ligament, how it's used literally with every movement of your lower body, et cetera, et cetera. Yes. And obviously Watson left the field on a cart. Now, let's not forget this, Bill. The Browns sent 6 draft picks, including 3 in the first round, to the Texans for him. Then they gave him a 5-year, $230 million contract. Contract was the first of its kind, fully guaranteed. He is due a combined $92 million in 2025 and 2026. Now, the Browns do have a little bit of what is called insured compensation. Thank you, Sports Track. Which means they insure $13.9 million, which they'll receive salary cap credit in 2025 for that. But his 2025 salary cap number, it's a league's second largest. You know what? I should have looked it up, but I did not look up who the largest salary cap number is. But in 2025, but his is pretty much $73 million. And if released, it would likely result in an increase of $99.9 million in cap charges. Dead money, if released, cutting Watson conventionally would create, meaning if they don't play the when they cut him type game, would create $173 million in dead money. If they designate him a post June 1st cut in 2025, it would result in $119 million. Now, and to make it worse, they can't even dump him without his say-so because he has a no-trade clause. To the audience, if these numbers are confusing, just understand this: $73 million, $99 million, $173 million. We're not talking, they got a $6 million cap hit, $15 million. We're usually talking $15, $20 million. It's just devastating. When you're talking $99 million, $173 million, we are talking, oh my God. Bill, first of all, I want to hear from you first before you get your comments. Is this the worst contract in NFL history or what?
Well, it appears to be the worst contract in NFL history. What's interesting about this to me is not long after they made that trade, he had his problems almost immediately, right? And had to take, I can't remember how many games off, but that happened almost immediately. They were hoodwinked into this thing. I'm telling you, there was no reason. If they had known that, would they have made the trade? Did they know? I don't think they knew. But the NFL was doing an investigation already. And I am really surprised that the NFL even let the trade go through, knowing what they knew about the investigation with, the women. And obviously that just keeps going and going. So, what's that?
I know why, Bill. I mean, I hate to interject like this, but this
Yeah,
show is built around the intersectionality of politics and sports.
yeah,
That was during the whole, you could not say anything negative against any minority of any kind without
yes,
getting a lot of backlash. So that wasn't
yeah,
all of it, but that had a big part to do with it, you know?
yeah,
So at the
yes,
end of the day, also, I believe the NFL believes this. If you're that stupid, it's like, it's stupid. You know all the ingredients that are in this current formula. You're using to judge this guy, and you're still going to
yeah,
make the deal. That's on you, Cleveland. So I think they
yeah.
knew. I think Cleveland is Cleveland. It's
Terrible
a culture
contract.
of ignorance.
I mean, he is proven to be a horrible leader there, underperformed. He has a few nice highlights and whatnot. But so let me ask you a question: are you saying that their best alternative, the 73 million, is to just keep him around and play it out? Is that what you're saying, as opposed to the other three numbers that you gave?
Well, actually, I'm not saying any of that in terms of I have no clue, and here's why. People. I always, when I was a fantasy stud, I was one of the best fantasy players in the nation at one point years ago. Now they got all this newfangled stuff. But when I was asked, so what's the hardest thing for you to do? And to me, that's judge heart.
Yeah,
Because it's hard.
yeah.
And the reason I say that is because that was the big question mark. And every formula has that X that you're trying to figure out. Well, we on the outside will never figure this out. The answer to this question resides in the locker room. Has he
Mm-hmm.
lost the players, or are the players still going to rally around him? Because they're stuck with him. They're not going to be able to field a team. I mean, the teams will be fielded a mediocrity with all these
Mm-hmm.
cap hits tying them up, et cetera, et cetera. And they're going to see this cap hits anyway with the way the NFL works.
Right.
But they've got to determine if the team still believes in him, you got to give him another shot. But if you truly think he's done, then maybe you keep him on the team. Say don't show up.
Yeah. Or
Don't. I
or
mean,
or
because at the
don't
end of
or
the day,
don't
you don't want him showing up.
don't rehab the Achilles. Because when I first heard it, I'm like, did he really? Because all the talk was prior to that was they're not going to bench him, right? But he could have an injury, and they would use that to pull him out for the rest of the year. Now, obviously, it looks like he really did have an injury, but prior to
Oh
that,
yeah.
they were
That wasn't
talking
the case.
about that,
Yeah.
right? Like they might use an injury of some sort to put him on IR, and then of course he gets a real injury. So I think it's in a way good for the Browns they can move on. He rehabs his injury, and some people, I mean, it's hard to come back from. I mean, Aaron Rodgers has come back, but they can be different, right? So I don't know the grade of his injury compared to Aaron Rodgers or some of the other ones that have occurred.
Oh. No. I see
But
what you're saying. Go
But
ahead.
he worked Aaron Rodgers worked really hard to get back to where he is now. And if he shows the heart that he showed on the field, he'll never get back from that injury because it's hard as hell to work through and get back on the field. So he probably never will get back because he doesn't give a damn. I don't think he cares. I really don't.
You're right. You're right. And my response to your question was for next year because he's done for this year.
Yes.
And the Browns are, they're in a quandary right now in terms of their future with him.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, I think it was the worst trade ever in NFL because it was
Oh yeah.
guaranteed. It was a
Yep.
guaranteed contract. I
Yep.
think long term they just tell him don't come back. And you're right. Again, in fantasy, I started working a formula. I did a lot of first because I was one of the first ones with the fantasy sports companies. So one of the first things we started tracking that we anecdotally started noticing was fat cats, players who got their big fat contract. It was like they had that phenomenal a season on the field during their contract year. Then once they got their contract, they were fat cats and they didn't produce
Yep.
as well.
Yep.
Deshaun Watson falls into the fat cat category, which goes along with what you're saying. The problem with the Achilles is you got to rehab that as it's healing too, so it doesn't
Yep.
the scar tissue, because it's that type of muscle. And I think he's done as an NFL starter. I think
Yeah.
he may be done in the NFL. You don't need somebody like him on your team. Even he won't get hungry again because he's got all these tens of millions. And here's the kicker, though. He's lost at 260 million. What's that? So that's 13 million. I'm sorry, that's 130 million he's pocketing.
Yep.
Again, anywhere from 30 to 50 million is gone in these 30 out of court settlements, depending on the seriousness of it. And so he still has it. So, but that still leaves him with 100 million,
Yeah.
98 million, 100 million. So will he have the heart, the desire? I say no.
No.
He won't.
No.
So, but now looking at it from Kevin Stefanski's point of view, he's non-committal about his long-term status. This is a bad break for the team. Is it, Kevin? Is it really? Focus. He's focusing. We got to look out after our players. He's giving the typical coach speak, or as I call tropes. So in his defense, so he's walking a tightrope because the owner, I think, before the injury, there were rumors that he was just spewing what the owner was telling him to spew. Because what else could he?
Right.
He's in a tough situation. He can't badmouth them and say, "Well, we're going to move on this and that," because they've got 100 million still invested in them. And so balancing the support for Watson with the need to consider the team's future option is a tightrope he's walking and no other coach has to. So Stefanski's been pushing the boss's talk, and he's been hamstring with Watson after they let Flacco walk. Now he must pretend to support him when in reality he wants him gone.
Right.
What's your take? Since you played college ball, you've seen these locker rooms firsthand. When you see a coach in this situation, what's going through that coach's mind? What's your take on this in terms of putting yourself in Stefanski's shoes?
Well, I mean, the injury helps him, in my opinion, in the locker room because you can move on from it, right? So you start working and preaching, the next guy up, and taking that tone and bringing the team together around that next guy up. So it takes away the talk about him and all the constant nonsense and rumors and negativity. And then what will happen is in the locker room, you'll have leaders stand up. People will show up that maybe hadn't talked as much, but new leadership will come up on the team through players. And you might even have some other coaches that, have a little bit more say, a little more leadership. But that's what they'll do. They'll move on like he's not even a part of the team, and they won't even discuss it anymore. And they'll look for the next guy up. They'll bond together as a team the best they can. And that's what the coach has to do. He has to rally them together, and move forward with what they have and get the guys to believe that they can do it. And they probably already do believe they can do it without him. And some players probably were tired of him because I don't think he was a great leader. I've never been in the locker room with him. I don't know what he was like in the locker room. But if I had to guess, he's one of those guys who packs up his bags and goes home, right? He's in and out quickly,
right.
Doesn't, mull around talking with guys all that much, in a real way, and he's gone. So I think you bear down, you talk about the next guy up, and bring the team together. And I think it'll actually help the Browns in the long run. The rest of this season might be tough, but they'll show up.
Okay, so looking ahead, let's look ahead next year, down the road. You got Myles Garrett and Joe Bitonio. I think that's how you say it, Bitonio.
Yeah.
How do you convince those guys we're going to go through a rebuild? I mean, it's Myles. Myles Garrett is already 29, or he'll be 29 this year.
Yeah.
These are not young players. How do you convince them this is a rebuild? And this, especially with these big guys who play these physical positions, how do you convince them to stick around for another rebuild?
Well, I mean, I don't think that happens. I think you get draft picks with those, other younger players or draft picks. If you're truly rebuilding, you need to get, you need to pick up the draft picks, and that's the way you do it, by trading these other guys, these, bigger name players, and then you do it through the draft. So to me, they might not stay around, and they might not, convince them to stay around. They might actually move them for draft picks or whatnot, to help them. What's
So
that?
a potential scenario would be the trade one of these two or both of these guys, and for draft picks and dump Deshaun and then just completely rebuild. This upcoming draft, the quarterback class isn't as rich as this class, but there's also the free agency market. Well, no, you'd want a young free agent, but it's a tough situation now. The current quarterback situation, veteran Jameis Winston is not going to be the long-term solution. We've seen what he has. The guy throws an interception for every 2 touchdowns. Second-year pro Dorian Thompson-Robinson, they're talking about giving him an extended look. He's got the finger issue, so we're going to see Jameis Winston early on. And there's a chance they could keep Jameis Winston in the starter's role because most people believe that Thompson-Robinson is pretty much backup material based on what we've seen. But in fairness, they should give him a few games. He injured the right middle finger this past week, so he's going to struggle to grip the ball. And they named Jameis Winston the starter, I think, partially because of that. But they need to determine that this kid, it's all they got. And you know why? Because where's Joe Flacco? And before I get into Joe Flacco, let me, you armchair hacks out there. I'm an armchair hack, but I'm a data guy. And I also was lucky enough, blessed enough to be able to talk to coaches, assistant coaches, scouts, journalists, agents because of my job. My website was in the top 2,000 in the world when I ran it. We had agents, general managers, and players going to our player news. We were the first company. That player news format, you see it everywhere. Us and RotoWire came out with it about the same time. The difference is we owned RotoWire. We had the contract to every major company out there as well as all the minors because that's how good our player news. So I had a lot of contacts, and let me tell you something. Joe Flacco was part of the team and was a big part of the reason the Baltimore Ravens won a Super Bowl. He was not an elite quarterback. He was not a terrible quarterback. He was a phenomenal game manager who could make the throws, go through his reads, meaning he wasn't a Patrick Mahomes, but he was good enough to win a Super Bowl. So these morons out there, you give Joe Flacco 4 or 5 games, you're going to see why he's Joe Flacco. But the guy's pushing 40. I don't care what you tell me about Watson, about Winston, about Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Flacco today is still better than those fools. Yeah. And the reason I say that is they let him walk in free agency. He signed with the Colts this past March. His production with the Colts in 3 games, 65.7% of his completion rate, 716 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 1 interception. His passer rating is 102.2. And it's not like the Colts had the best offensive line in the league. Far from it. So they make the right decision in letting Flacco walk? I say they made the right decision in letting him walk, but they made the wrong decision in thinking Watson would return to form. Meaning, I think they let him walk because they didn't want Watson to become a pajama boy looking over his shoulder. What's your take there, Big Bill?
Well, Joe Flacco just continues to get the job done, right? He's a pro's pro. He's a backup when he's a backup. When he has to step in, he gets the job done. He's who you want as a backup because the backups around the league aren't that great. I mean, they're not going to come in necessarily. And that's one of my big beefs about the NFL, but we'll talk about that at another time. But if there's a backup, he's the one I want as a backup because he's smooth, he's smart. The game is really slow for him, so he can get his job done. He knows how to attack the defenses. He throws a great ball. I mean, doesn't matter how old he is. He throws a great ball, and he hasn't lived off mobility, so that's not a downside either, right? He's not that mobile. So, nothing, that's not a big surprise. It hasn't like it's disappeared. He's the same person he was, years ago. Coming out of Delaware. But, so I think they did what you said they did. They dumped him. They overestimated what Watson would do and his impact. And in the meantime, or have no backups for Watson. He gets injured. He's a disaster from a leadership standpoint. And then you don't have Flacco, and now you have Winston. That guy's been a dumpster fire ever since he came into the league. He just keeps making the same mistakes over and over and over again. So they made a real big mistake depending on Watson, and then also letting it's a lose-lose basically what they created.
Yes. And in the Browns' defense, after week one, they would have been screaming for Flacco, and that would have caused chaos in the locker room.
Yes,
because I think the players would have turned on Watson. And from a business standpoint, you can't have a locker room turning on a guy who you still owe 3 years worth of salary to, guaranteed. So the Browns put themselves in this situation.
Yep.
Wow. So to clear it up though, based off of all the numbers throughout in the beginning, has 2 years remaining on contract, $46 million per year over the next 2 seasons. So here's the thing: for every victory that he's played in 19 games, he's won 9, $25.56 million per game, per winning game he has cost them. So real quick, you've already alluded to it, but what are your thoughts? Should they give Thompson Robinson the helm to see what they have in a young kid, or do you think there's?
Well, I don't think they have anything to lose. They might as well see what they have. Jameis Winston. You know him, right? He's not going to be any different than he's been. So I would give I'd give the young guy a shot. And, if he's injured and he can't, obviously then you have somebody on the sideline, but you already know what you have with him. I also would go back to, Watson and say, rework his contract. I don't know if they were even, thinking about that. They probably are. His agent, and himself might not want to, but people do rework their contract.
Why? Why would he want? He has a guaranteed contract.
Yeah. What I'm saying is extend it out so if let's say he never plays football again, right? Which is probably the case.
Oh, you're talking baseball.
And just extend it out. Like the Mets are still paying Bobby Bonilla, talking about, what did you call him? A fat cat? Bobby Bonilla is still paid by the New York Mets. He has 1 or 2 years left and it's done. So if you can do that, now I don't know the details of this, but extend it out over a few more years and help yourself possibly with the cap by doing so. It's complicated. I can't say that's my specialty, but that's something I would think about. Now, he might say, screw that, I'm not going to do it. But I don't think he's ever going to play again.
When I said it's a baseball thing to the audience, this is, as he pointed out with Bobby Bonilla, the Padres were paying Bruce Hurst like 9 years after he retired. Right. after he left, so and that's a smart move, but why should he bother unless he can gain a tax benefit from it? He has no reason to do that. Players in the NFL restructure their contract because what teams usually do is we'll make some of that unguaranteed money guaranteed through a bonus, and then we can, through our accountants, work out the numbers to make it less of a cap hit. All righty, so the fan reaction. Boo, boo, we're imitating Philly fans. Boo. Now, LeBron was like, man, what you cats doing? Don't be doing that. And, LeBron's in the right. LeBron's the wrong person to say that. He's such a polarizing character. And Myles Garrett expressed disappointment. I'll buy it, even though he's had his own issues with comments on Twitter, as well as the big lie he said about Mason Rudolph when he played the race card. But the one that cracked me up is Jameis Winston. And why do I say that is, what happened here? Is Jameis Winston because of this guy has a sordid history of winning. And he's talking about, y'all can't be sitting there yelling at that guy who's down. He's a warrior. He says he's a great human being. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? They were wrong to boo, but they were booing out of frustration that they're stuck with a bum who didn't even apologize when he apologized last season in regards to his off the field issues. What are your thoughts? And I got to ask, because Jameis Winston that is not the win you think it is, Watson, to have Winston sticking up for you.
Well,
Another
no, it's
alleged
yeah,
adult a rapist,
right.
alleged.
Well, some teams, the Steelers, have been one of those teams in the past. They will not look at people like that. They will just not put them on their football team. I have to actually look at the Browns management. What in the hell are they looking at? How do they evaluate these players? And what do they choose not to look at, right? So, yeah, how are these two guys both on the Browns, right? So I want to, I'd love to have someone from management on the show and ask them about that, because that's on them. This guy hasn't changed his colors or stripes. He's the same guy. And all of a sudden he's on the team, and you also know that you have the problem with Watson. I mean, to me, it's a back office nightmare that,
Right.
up in the suite. What are they thinking? I mean, the GM and in the ownership, they're all responsible for this. And they can't say they're not.
Right. I was thinking while you were talking, Jameis Winston, before he got hurt, he tore his own Achilles or ACL in the Saints. They were managing him pretty well as a quarterback, meaning they were limiting his deep ball, which is where he does a lot of his turnovers. He's got a great arm. Nobody can doubt that. But depending who the OC is, I wouldn't write him off, because I think he could become a Vinny Testaverde if he's willing to work at it. Remember, Ryan Fitzpatrick was a perennial backup.
Yes.
In his final few years, he became a semi-starter. The problem with these gunslingers like Fitzpatrick and Winston is the interceptions just come at the worst time. It's one thing to throw an interception when it's not consequential. It's another thing to become known for throwing them at the wrong time, like on a 2-minute drill at the end of a half or something. All right. So let's move on. But before, Deshaun Watson's era. I'm sorry, Billy. Any final words on this?
No, I'm just discipline is his problem, right? On and off the field. Same with Watson. And if you're a gunslinger and you don't have correct discipline, you're going to make a ton of mistakes that kill you. So it doesn't matter, what
you're right.
What your arm you have. Yeah.
That's why Favre only won one Super Bowl. The guy was an undisciplined gunslinger who was better than average, and that's why they got to the Super Bowl, because of him and the defense. But he was the epitome of that team in the locker room as a leader. He was a leader. He may have been a brash punk, but he led that team through his actions.
Yes, he did.
And just real quick, to show that case, he went to a bar with some of the fellas, and somebody got drunk, started talking trash. Favre got in the guy's face to protect the buddy. And when they saw that, well, he's willing to lay it out for us. He won the locker room with that. All right, so Deshaun Watson's era with the Browns is, to me, effectively over. And his time as an NFL starter. That's my prediction. It's clear Watson fell into the category of getting fat and lazy after getting a fat contract with a few massages. Now the team must determine if Dorian Thompson-Robinson should be given an opportunity, because most believe he's merely backup material. But hey, what have you got to lose? Regardless, it's going to be a long 3 months in terms of what's left of the season for the Browns. Bill, let us move on. Let us move on to a story that I find very fascinating and very humbling, and that is the Patriots tidbits here, specifically Barmore. Christian Barmore, defensive tackle who hasn't played since last year because of blood clots. And I'm not saying anything, but my first question was did he take the jab? To be that young to have blood clot issue? I'm like, whoa, I could be wrong. Yeah. And I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying I have to ask a question. But regardless, to bring the audience back up to par here, defensive tackle Christian Barmore was pulled over by police in Providence, Rhode Island due to an expired vehicle registration. The initial reaction, once he got stopped, the guy reminded me of this a-hole who would not shut up, was angry, kept talking trash, and got thrown in jail for the night. That a-hole was me. Sometimes you got to learn how to stop talking trash. He was lucky. He was not thrown in jail. He was throwing the race card. You know who I am, yada, yada, yada. And the media reaction early on, racism, man, these cops are bad, blah, 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 until the cam came out. And it turned out there was a bad dude, and it wasn't any of the cops. It was Mr. Barmore. And the
Right.
media had to eat crow. And did they come out and apologize, the ones that defended him, based off no evidence, but through their liberal, progressive, ugly beliefs of hate? No, they did not. But I want to give props to Barmore. Barmore apologized. Now, one reason, Bill, he apologized was because of Mama. Mama was a cop. You would think Mama was a cop. But I think, the problem with players, and Bill, you give me your input here. But I think the problem with players is once it's discovered they're special, they have that special talent, they're never told no. And when they get in trouble, it's covered up. And I think that's what came out with Barmore there. Well, he apologized. He says he needed to deeply reflect. He went to the Providence department in person because he's not playing. So he could do that. Met with members of the Providence Police Department, apologized. He could be a great spokesman to bridge the gap between black athletes and cops. He acknowledged his mother's a police officer, which gave him insight. You know what happened? I don't have it. That Batman and Robin beat, where Batman or Robin slaps Batman or whoever slapping who. That was his mom slapping him. Boy, what you doing? So I am happy. I give him props for apologizing because he could have slivered into the background and not done anything. So my question to you, it's not explicitly stated, but I think all this backlash he faced was because of the body cam. Your thoughts as a former athlete and as just a regular human being and an American who wants to see truth, justice, American way. What are your thoughts of these body cams now? Cops did not want them at first, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, now you want them because it protects you from your, when you're in the field. It's like an insurance policy, right? You have to have
Clover.
Yeah, it's actually my bulldog Bailey. Some lights hit the screen, so he's just getting his 2 cents in. Clover is not my favorite dog. Clover's a dachshund, and we have the English bulldog. But it's an insurance policy for the cops to have that body cam on. They didn't see it like that in the beginning, but they do now, right? And so I think it's a great idea. And by the way, if that was me who got pulled over and I did that, I would have been in jail. So he did get a break. He got a break. And also, if you think he went to apologize on his own, you're fooling yourself. The team, the management sat him down and said, "This is what you're going to do," and his mom too, because she was a cop. But if you don't think the New England Patriots didn't get involved in it and say, you have to do A, B, C, D, E, and F, or else, that's what happened. And then,
I think
it's not him
got involved, but I think between the team and Mama, Gerard Mayo probably had nothing to do with it. And I based that off of Gerard Mayo's first interview when he played the woke card. And I'm like, so I think this was Mama. And then when Mama did it, the team sat there and said, PR, bro, why are you doing this? You're not even helping the team right now. You're more of a distraction. I agree with you there. My issue with the body cams, I used to tell my friend who was a cop, he's actually a martial artist who used to train me once a week for like 10 years. And despite that, I never went from white belt to I stayed at white belt pretty much. But 10 years of training. But my point is, he's a cop, retired now, and he retired because of all this woke crap. But he did not like it at first. And then like a year afterwards, he was singing its praises. It did two things. I told people it would do two things. It would help the fight against blatant racism in the form of the race card and would help in the fight against elitism. Those are the two things that people pull on cops. Do you know who I am? Some politician. They got this white Republican. I'm a conservative. He's a rhino more. But down in Florida, he was just a belligerent. And then I saw somebody play the race card just like he was. So I don't care what your issue is. If you're a penis, you're being a penis, and it needs to be called out. And that's what these cams do. So your final words on this before we move on.
Well, I just think I don't buy the fact that he did this all on his own. So it doesn't affect me one way or another. I still have my opinion on the incident, and it will happen again. He hasn't changed. He just went through what the motions because of his mom, obviously, and management, I believe, was involved in it, and probably his agent too. Whose obvious best interest is to keep him going, right?
Yes.
So that's how they addressed it. But I don't think he's changed. I don't think he's a different person. He's just saving himself temporarily.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. This is the second incident this season. The first one was Tyreek Hill. That kind of went away.
Yeah.
When his teammates stopped, they're beating him, man. Yeah, he's sitting on the curb. Why you want to lie? See, that's how race riots start. Is
that's
a bigot
terrible.
Like that teammate. Yeah, know. And when you looked at the buddy cam, it's like, no, Tyreek, you're acting like a prima donna ass. And that's slithered away too. So these body cams are good, and it has nothing to do with being against black, white, Latino, whatever.
No.
It has to do with the truth, because until we all look in the mirror at our own issues, we're never going to move forward as Americans. And the sadness about this is these body cams are exposing the truth for all to see, and we have to look at them and learn and understand. Meaning, we have to look at them and look in the mirror. I mean, I joke about, but I got jacked up by that cop, and I was pissed. I would not stop. I was just being an a-hole, And the cop, I mean, what I was stopped for was wrong, but I deserve what I got because I put the cop in that situation.
Right.
But Bill, what cop wears a freaking pair of sunglasses on at 9:00 at night? Come on, man.
Well, yeah, there are those kind of guys too who, go a little bit over the top. So I've had that happen as well. Hey, look, I'm not the nicest guy either. I don't want to get pulled over. I think, sometimes it's completely random, right? And, so those, I'm not the best at those experiences as well, but,
Well, now I am now. I am not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're older, you're wise, you have wisdom in your years, right? I mean, but I just
getting jacked up.
Yeah. Well, that'll teach you a lesson.
Oh man!
How many cops did they have for this? How many cops were there for this stop? I think I saw 7 in one picture.
Yes, because they didn't know. Here's the problem for the audience. He was just being belligerent, and his hands, and he didn't want to get out of the car at first, So cops have died walking up to a car. So y'all who hate cops, y'all hate cops till you need one. That's the problem with life. All right.
Yep.
Let's stick with the Patriots.
Yep.
Gerard Mayo called his team soft. Bill Belichick took offense to it. They lost 32-16 against the lowly Jacksonville Jaguars and saved their head coach's job down there in Jacksonville. I'm drawing a blank. Ex-Philadelphia coach. What's his name?
I know I'm blanking on his name right now too.
But he scrutinized their toughness and competitiveness. He described them as, quote, soft. Citing issues with running the ball, stopping the run, and covering kicks. My take on that portion of our discussion here is you don't publicly call your team out like he did.
Right.
Why would he try to sound tough without looking? I mean, it's like he's trying to make himself look tough. I'm a tough coach. It reminds me of the offensive Mike Tice. I'm going to send a message to this team. You can't mess around. I'm the head coach, and I want a certain type of caliber. Coach, you cut the punter. It's not like you cut a star player, It's and that's how I look at Mayo. You're just talking tough. If you make a statement, it's going to be against a scrub. You don't. What's that say about laundry? You don't throw your laundry out in public. You do that inside. What's your thoughts?
Well, Peterson's the coach from the Jaguars.
Doug Peterson.
Okay, and I have another thought. Okay, first of all, you keep that talk inside. As a coach, you're responsible for your team on and off the field, and position coaches and whatnot, right? So your team isn't soft unless you're soft or you're doing something wrong, or you just have to take the hit for the team and then deal with it during the week, right? You don't throw your team under the bus. Second, I hate the games in London. I hate the games in Mexico. I hate the international games because you take a game away from the home team for the fans, and you know what? It's a long trip. and it's a away game for both teams. And, whether or not they handle the travel, they might be their first time over there. I think it's a terrible idea. The NFL is trying to become international, and I understand they already are to some degree, but I hate the games overseas. The games are on at 6 a.m. out here, so I wake up and it's over. And not that I would watch the Patriot-Jacksonville game anyway, but I think it's wrong. Keep the game in the U.S. Let them turn the TV on and watch it. We don't need to have our teams traveling around to other places overseas. I don't like it at all. And I think also that creates an environment where maybe the Patriots would have played better in the States. I don't know. And Jacksonville got away with one. But at any rate, I think it's folly. I don't think they should be doing it. But nonetheless, you don't throw your team under the bus like that. You have to take responsibility.
I agree. I'm with you completely on that one. I think it's silly. I think it's dumb. I think there's no way you're going to be able to have an international league unless you literally have one league in Europe and then one league in North America. Then they meet, because that back and forth is going to kill the players. So what's your thoughts on Bill Belichick calling Mayo out? Meaning he says, I'm kind of hurt, quote from Belichick, I'm kind of hurt for those guys because to call them soft, they are not soft. They were the best team in the league last year against the run. That's a shot at Mayo. I mean, it really is. What he's saying is they were pretty good last year. The only difference is you're the new ingredient in that recipe, So what do you think about – give me your thoughts. I am not a player's coach guy. I think I did a study on Super Bowl winners in terms of coaches, and it was like 100-1 in terms of disciplinarian coaches versus a player's coach and winning them. What's your thoughts, first of all, on Belichick calling them out? Because he called them out. Do you think that was a personal jab because it's the Patriots? Or do you think it was just Belichick just taking that, just saying what he truly believes? And what are your thoughts on player coaches versus disciplinarian coaches?
Yeah, no, well, I think, there's two ways to look at that. I think he took a jab at him, no doubt. And, also there might be something behind the scenes with the two of them that we know about. So that's another thing. Usually coaches don't do that like that. So you don't throw your team under the bus, but an ex-coach for the most part won't come out that hard against another coach, especially from the same organization. So something's brewing there. What we can't, we don't know about. Excuse me, I can't get that out. But it seems like something that a coach wouldn't say. Whether he should have said it or not, he said it. Mayo said what he said about the team being soft. And I think when you're doing that, you're not taking accountability for being the head coach. It stops with you, right? So if your team's soft, you should be doing something about it to fix that problem, right? It's not like they're soft and I'm doing everything I can. No, change something, fix it. If you think they're soft, then fix the damn problem. Don't just get up in front of the mic and say they're soft. I mean, that's a disgrace from a head coach to his players. And then back to the discipline. Well, Andy Reid's a pretty damn successful coach, and he's a player's coach. So
whoa. Yeah. See, everybody brings Andy Reid up. Yeah. You're right. But he's been in the league for 20 years. Yes. He's also a disciplinarian.
Yes,
he doesn't tolerate. When I say disciplinarian, I'm talking about somebody who creates a culture of winning, who creates a culture. No, penalties are not acceptable. Too many times when I see a player's coach, they're grown men. They know what they need to do. Andy Reid's not like that. Andy Reid covers it from the very bottom, and he's built literally. He's shown he's done in the NFL what Saban's done in college. And the reason I say that is because he's got a process. And if you don't, the players love him, but he's a disciplinarian.
No, he is. But he's a hybrid, though, right? I mean, he tells you what you need to do, and if you do it, everything's fine. And he's a player's coach too, right? So he's fair. What I'm going to say is he's fair. Okay. He was in college. He was my offensive line coach at Texas El Paso. So,
Jamil, hold on. So you probably loved him. He comes across a very friendly guy.
Well, I loved him.
But was he a stickler for the fundamentals?
Well, I wasn't in, his room a lot because he was a line coach, right? But no, he was a stickler. He'd let you know, when you weren't doing your job right and whatnot. But, he was fair then too, though. right? And everybody knew what was expected, and you had to do that. And if you did that, it was fair. I mean, then he turned into a player's coach, right? I mean, he's not going to be a player's coach if you're not doing what you're supposed to do and you're not helping the team. But overall,
see, that's just it. That's just it. You contradicted yourself. He's not going to be a player's coach unless he's doing that. And that to me, see, his personality towards the players is secondary. It's being a disciplinarian means you have the fundamentals on. You understand that playbook. You're going to make the throws or your bench. This or that. That's who he is.
But it's a little more complicated than that because he also is supportive and he'll go to town for those players, right? Disciplinarian coaches don't have that relationship necessarily, right? So, it's very it's to him. Okay, it's family to him. It's family, right. And that creates. You have the discipline, but you also have the player coach piece of it too, right? So he's not a player coach where there's no discipline because then all hell breaks loose and you're not successful, right?
And that's what I'm talking about. Like Mayo did right now. Hell's broken loose and they're not playing. It's because he has not instilled the culture of winning, of discipline. And when I say discipline, that means from A to Z. You want to be great at. From Brady said it best when who's the current quarterback? Mayfield said, they wanted me to loosen up the locker room. Everything was pretty uptight with Tom Brady. And Brady took offense, like, well, if winning Super Bowls means I'm uptight, then I'm uptight. Yeah. And that's what I'm talking about winning. You're in that locker room to win. Yeah.
It's easy to not discipline. It's easy to create a loose environment because you don't have to work hard at it. But it takes time and years to put together that framework where everybody knows what's expected. Everybody knows what will happen if you don't. But if you do what you're supposed to, you have this family-like atmosphere. And believe me, not every NFL team has a family-like atmosphere at all, right?
Giants.
And he does a great job. So I call him a hybrid. But I do agree with you, to get to the Super Bowl like Coughlin, with the Giants or whatever it might be, you have to be disciplinarian because those players need to know that they're players and they're paid to do a job, right? They're not coaches.
Exactly.
And doesn't matter how much they make, they still need to be coached.
Exactly. Reed is off. I mean, I'm not saying he's from this coaching tree, but he's off the personality tree. He's from the coaching personality tree of a Bill Walsh type guy. A guy who knew the X's and O's, demanded discipline with those X's and O's and fundamentals, but yet the players still love it. So yeah. All right. So only Gerard Mayo can sit there and instill the toughness and create that cultural shift. By that I mean the type of team he wants in that locker room. Only he can do that. So he needs to look in the mirror and not spout this nonsense publicly that can cause him to lose loyalty with the locker room and have him out on his butt in a year. All righty, let's move on to and I say this one for last. I thought it's a little bit of fun because I've been on the Russell Wilson bandwagon since last year. When I saw Russell Wilson come out, undersized guy, short, a lot of question marks, I was so impressed watching his first preseason game. I was like, oh my God, this kid has legs, but he uses them to find more time to throw. I have never, ever in my life, and watching football since the 70s as a child, seen a rookie with that ability. Players usually grow into that as they get older. They can't run, they hits, etc. So they learn how to become a pocket QB. He had that talent naturally from the get-go. But then his last 5 years with the 4 or 5 years with the Seahawks, I saw somebody whose head was so big he couldn't get in and out of the locker room. And that big old head went to Denver. He had his own floor, his own assistant, his own office. He was a prima donna. And he got humbled. And then Sean Payton came. Sean Payton had a good enough coach, a player there, but Sean Payton wants to bring in his own guy. And look, Bo Nix has performed decent, not spectacularly. That defense has carried them for a good chunk of some of their wins. So the jury's still out. And Sean Payton is known for not being a good guy. I mean, remember, this is the guy who got away because his name was Sean Payton in terms of the punishment he richly deserved from Bounty Gate. He shouldn't be coaching in the NFL. When you try
Should
to
he,
take, when you,
should he not be coaching in the NFL?
no.
If Downey
Anybody,
gave
anybody who
bullshit.
sits there, if
No.
anybody who pays somebody to take to end somebody's
That shit
career,
happens all the time. William, the one thing you have to see that what I don't like about, I agree that shouldn't happen, of course.
hold on. So what I'm hearing is you're okay with a player being paid to take somebody
No,
out.
no, I'm not okay with it. But what I'm not okay with it is using them as a scapegoat. And once again, the NFL just takes one situation, penalizes one organization only, right? Doesn't look any deeper, because you could have looked deeper around the NFL and you could have found other things that were going on too. And what they did is
you're saying that
yeah.
There were other teams that had bounties on other players.
I'm saying there were other teams that had other incentives or spoke that language around the league. Of course, yeah, no doubt. They might not have had a payment system. They might not have had a payment system. They might have had another system, but they have it, and they had it, and they penalize the Saints. But the one reason I don't like it is because of the fan. They penalize the team, and the fan's the one who's penalized. Did they lower the ticket rates, the ticket prices in New Orleans when that happened? I don't think so, right? So they took a product away from the Saint fans and only the Saints. Right, that's the problem I have with it. It's not consistent.
Apples and oranges. That's apples and oranges.
Well, no, but that's in the days where the problem with the NFL is Roger Goodell can fly around in his private fucking jet, excuse the language, and also be the judge and jury. That's a farce, and that's what was going on.
That is a farce, but
he did the same thing to John
apples and oranges. I disagree with that, but you're missing my point.
What's your point?
You're talking about ending a player's career in this era. We're talking millions. We're talking ending a player's career who could earn a lot of money to help generations of his family. When you pay somebody to knock a player out, to take him out of the game, a game that has seen.
Isn't that what we're doing? Isn't that what they're paid for already? Yeah, an athlete is paid to win. It's a physical game. Are you telling me? I don't agree with this. It's a physical game. They're being paid to hurt each other already.
No, you're being paid. See, I don't agree. It's like these guys when they leap to hit the guy. I'm like, why? Because you want to be on ESPN highlights. You do. And you know what pisses me off about these assholes is they care more about that hit.
Right.
Why didn't you just wrap up and tackle him? Because you wanted to hurt him. You wanted to hurt.
Well, they don't tackle. There's no tackling anymore. They just use their shoulder.
Problem. To me, how many losses can you attribute to he didn't tackle, he tried to hit him, and now that guy gained another 10 yards, and now they're at field goal range. So no, the game is not about taking somebody out. The game is not about hitting them and taking them out. The game is about winning and losing. And maybe you should learn how to fucking tackle. Instead of
I mean, that's on the coaching stuff. I mean, I don't know where.
I'm not done. I'm not done.
Go on, baby.
Take it another step further. I love being on the ESPN. Well, you're gonna pay me $30,000 if I take Farb out? Damn right. Let's go, baby. And where does it start? With the fucking head coach.
Yeah, well, it does. But I don't.
Here's the thing I knew. Here's the thing. I was in the game in the sense of being involved in that industry. Payton was never seen as a nice guy. This fits exactly with the personality and type of human being he is. It was okay. It was okay in his eyes that potentially end somebody's career.
Did they end anybody's career? Did they end anybody's?
It doesn't.
Did they though?
Okay. No. It's like a drunk. Well, he hasn't killed anybody, so
but wait a minute. If I'm a head coach. And I'm talking to my team, it's a physical game. It's a violent game, football, right? I don't think you should pay someone to intentionally hurt somebody. Now, I didn't look at it that way. I didn't look at it that way, though. I didn't look at it that way. I was like, we want to play a physical game. The best hit of the game gets a bonus. What's wrong with that? I mean,
they were being paid to take the quarterback out.
Did they ever take a quarterback out?
I can't remember.
Yeah, but if that's their own, my point is, if that was their own objective, if their only objective was to take the quarterback out. They could have done it every single game with a late hit. Every single quarterback they played, they could have taken out. Oh, it's only an incentive to play harder.
When you cheat, you can't make it obvious. Look what happened to the Green Bay Packers guy who took Jim McMahon out after the play or after the interception, picked him up and slammed him. You can't make it obvious because then it unravels, which is what happened. Look, I don't care how physical the game is because it is a physical game. I care about the fact that somebody was paying his players to physically take somebody out. There's a difference between playing hard and as men are.
I totally agree, but I just want to make the point. You can't single out one team. Yeah, but you can't single out one team then investigate the whole league. They don't want it, but they don't want to investigate the whole league because it will damage the league. So they use one team as an example. But the problem I have with that is now the fan had that team. The fan. What happens to the fan?
That has nothing to do with it.
No, the fan's paying a ticket price to go see a game with the best talent and the best coaching staff that they could possibly put together, and they stripped them down
because they were cheating.
Well,
they were cheating.
That's not cheating.
That's like saying, "Hey, he's drunk, but he hasn't killed anybody yet."
I don't. But I'd like to go back to that season and see exactly how many people were hurt and what happened to the opposing teams and whatnot. They used him as an example. It was a scapegoat, and that's what I don't like about the NFL because it's not equal around the league. They make their choices. They don't have Goodell's a judge and jury, and he's too powerful. It's been watered down now where there's more people involved in it, against players and whatnot. But I understand what you're saying. I don't like that. I don't think it's right, but I don't think it's also right to just single out one team and not look at the whole league.
I can see that, but at the end of the day, you make an example of somebody to start. There's this old saying, there's no belief that was there a
bylaw? Was there a bylaw in the NFL anywhere that you couldn't pay a player for the best hit of the game? Was there?
Yeah, there are. I can't remember what they are.
No, but I mean, because I don't remember seeing the exact bylaw that they violated, but they might have. I'm just saying I didn't see it. I just don't think they liked it.
You would have made a great lawyer. Yeah. There was no typical rule there. There was no typical rule there. So it's okay that the guys.
No, but I'm saying if there's no rule, you didn't violate anything. I mean, if there's no holding rule in football and I hold, I'm not doing anything wrong.
So you
can't make the rule up after the fact. That's what I'm saying.
Again. So you believe you're not winning if you're not cheating, or you believe in he's never killed anybody.
No, I don't believe that. No. What I'm saying is you can't use one person and penalize one person or one group and not look at everyone else. That's what I'm saying.
You can.
You have different rules, different people.
You got to have the proof, Bill. You got to have a reason to do an investigation. And if these guys are really good at keeping it on the ground,
let's go back. All right. Let's go back to then. If we're going to get into this thing, this is great. I love this. But then let's go back and say, you know what? Anybody who's abused a woman cannot be playing in the NFL anymore. And there's a hell of a lot of players that have had problems with women that are still playing. And that's my point. Ray Rice got caught in an elevator, a disgrace, right? It ruined his career. He never got back on his feet. But guess what? Cleveland has Hunt running for him. He was a running back for them. He's as bad as Watson and as bad as Winston. Right? I mean, so let's just clean the NFL out of any player.
Hold on, Lawyer Bill. Yeah. Article 9.1, C8, parentheses C, parentheses 8. No bonus may be paid to a player or players for winning a particular game. Boom. I'm looking at it. Article 9.3. Oh, hold on. There's more. There's Article 9.1, Article 9.3, Article 9.3G. The first one was F. So there's a whole litany of rules here. And they have these rules because there's a union. So they have to negotiate all this stuff.
Of course.
Anyway, let's get back to the original topic.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. We know you're okay with the drunk driving as long as he hasn't killed anybody.
No. Well, if you don't, so if you run a stop sign, okay, if you run a stop sign and nothing happens, you didn't violate a rule because there was nothing happened from running the stop sign.
That's what you're saying. That's what you're
Well,
saying.
do you want a camera at every intersection to see what every car does? Because if something doesn't happen, nothing happened.
You see, you're equating with a stop sign to potentially a human being.
Well, basically, I just don't like the red light. I don't like the cameras at the intersections. That's what I'm saying. Because I'm a libertarian and I want my freedom to do whatever I choose and leave me alone. But I don't like the cameras. But
that's just it. Your freedom impinges on others, like the drug law in New Orleans. I mean, in Oregon, that they let lapse the legalization of drugs because too many homes were being broken into, too much violence was occurring because you have a freaking meth head robbing a home, So that's my issue. Anyway, it's a completely different discussion. Let's get back to the original topic. So let's make this quick. Now we're at the 105 mark here. So Mike Tomlin made the decision to start Russell Wilson over Justin Fields, despite Fields being the quarterback and the team having a 4-2 record. I take offense with Fields leading the team to a 4-2 record. They say that because he was a quarterback. He did not lead the team to a 4-2 record. If you want to know the truth, the defense led that team to a 4-2 record. And in Fields' defense, he did not lose any of the games. But that's a team that's built heavily on rushing the ball and play action pass. And Fields was just not growing in that role. And he still kept tucking the ball and running. You can praise his running skills, but you need a quarterback to actually be a damn quarterback, And his accuracy wasn't there. Pickens was not playing well. So they started Russell Wilson. Now, Russell Wilson, as I said earlier, had a head so big his last few years in Seattle, he couldn't fit it into the locker room. But then he got humbled, had a terrible year one. Then that's what got us going. Peyton threw him under the bus.
Yeah, right.
And then he signed a $1.2 million deal with the Steelers with the caveat, hey, I want a chance to start. I'm not coming here to be a backup. I'm not coming here to be a mentor. I want a chance to start. I want a chance to play. Okay. Then they traded for Fields. Fields shows glimpses of potential. Russell Wilson is a proven guy who's got too big, who got humbled. When Russell Wilson went back to his offseason training, I'm like, he was humbled. He's learned. He's trying to go back and gain some of his years back. Then he was named the starter at the preseason competition, and then he got hurt with his calf strain. But I thought Tomlin made the right decision. Before this game, what were your thoughts on that? Do you think he should have benched? It's easy hindsight, so I'm asking you that.
Well, no, I mean, look, I just go back to the Bears, okay, with Fields. There were great moments, right? But he had a losing record, and it was a mess. So being 4-2 with him as a starter is a bonus. You just won the lottery, in my opinion, because he wasn't going to bring them to the playoffs and the success that people might have thought. He'll go back to being who he is, and it won't happen. So you got what you could get at. Wilson gets hurt. By the way, the offense is perfect for him, right?
Yes, play action
and a great defense. And by the way, talking about a disciplinarian, but also as a player coach, Tomlin is the best at that, right? He demands a high level all the time. So I think that's good for Wilson, right? So that's another thing that plays in his boat. Fields will now start pouting. The problem with him is now, what's his attitude going to be? Because near the end in Chicago, he started just moaning and sort of, just wasn't into it and was complaining to the media and so forth. But so I have no problem with it. I'm not in the locker room with Tomlin. I'm not in his mind, but I think he had a game plan after Wilson got hurt to get to a certain point, and I think he's there. And I have no problem with him pulling Fields and putting Wilson in as a starter.
I was just thinking, Fields, it's not my fault, man. It's that defender who stepped in front of my pass and intercepted. It's his fault, man. That was a perfect pass. And to reiterate what I was saying on defense, the Steelers, 7th in points allowed per game.
Yeah.
18.1, tied for fifth in turnovers generated with 13, second in sacks with 26. They're weak against the run. They're giving up 117 yards, but they're 13th in yards per rush attempt, and they're ranked 24th in passing yards. So the defense's strength is built around their ability to take away the big play with the
Yep.
sacks and pressure. So they'll give up yards between the 20s, but they clamp down with a lot of pressure. And I agree with your take. I think Fields can still develop. He's got to get the pajama boy mentality and man up. And this scenario is best for him because Russell Wilson is 38, 35 or 38, I forget. But he's only got 2 to 3 years. But with the Steelers, they can go to me, they are a top tier team in the AFC. If what we saw this past week from Wilson continues, he is perfect for Arthur Smith's offense, which can take advantage of the play action. And the thing with Wilson, he's not a runner, but he can scramble and find time to find George Pickens, and that creates greater hope. Winning solves everything.
Yes.
There were rumblings and grumblings in that locker room already because the receivers weren't getting theirs, So you can be 4-2 and be miserable. People forget the Oakland Raiders were like 12-2 one season with Mark Wilson, but everybody hated Mark Wilson because they were winning despite him. And that's what Wilson in his defense was not losing games, but he was walking that fine line, and without the improvement, and he was improving. Let's give him some credit, but he wasn't functioning well in that offense. Now, Terry Bradshaw, who I sat there and said, I did not say I was quoting or I was paraphrasing Hollywood Henderson, the great secondary player for the Dallas Cowboys when they had the great rivalry in the 70s. He one day, in a famous quote, said Terry Bradshaw couldn't spell cat if you spotted him the C and the T. Now, he was wrong. That was the era when quarterbacks called their own play still,
Right.
But Terry Bradshaw, that was his reputation. Golly Joe, dumb redneck type. But he's become that dumb redneck over the last few years with some of his comments. And Ben Roethlisberger was another one who said you keep Fields the starter. What irked me about Bradshaw, he was the first one to whine about you don't lose your job to injury when Chuck Noll eventually said you're not a starter, Cliff Stout is. And then Cliff Stout left for the USFL. But I'm really dating myself. But at the end of the day, I think this is a great move by Tomlin. I think they got the better quarterback. I think Wilson knows he's on his last legs, is going back to his old ways to try to salvage his final few years and to prove not only his detractors wrong, but to throw it in Sean Payton's face. And I'm looking for, I don't know if they play this year, but if they make it to the playoffs and play, I'm just looking forward to seeing the Steelers play the Broncos. So I'm not sure. But what are your final thoughts on this?
Final thoughts on this. Well, I'll wrap it up with this. He throws a much better football. He's more accurate. Play action suits him. Defense wins championships, creates short fields, and all you have to execute. And you can't make mistakes. And Fields is the exact opposite on all of that. So I think it's a great move. Fields just has to do what he does as a backup, learn how to be a quarterback in that system, right? Use your legs when you absolutely need to, right? And then you'll be better for that. And he'll be a better quarterback too, right? Because Wilson doesn't have a whole lot of time left, but in my mind, he's the best quarterback right now for the Pittsburgh Steelers down from this game on and down the road.
I agree. And for the audience out there, they do not play in the regular season. So if they play at all, it will be in the postseason. I think Russell, to the audience, I think Russell Wilson has been humbled. He is back on track. He understands he doesn't have much time left and wants to maximize it. As Bill said, being with the Steelers, with the disciplinarian. See, Tomlin to me is more disciplinarian, but the players get him and they understand. Right. Tomlin is what I call a leader of men, and that's a great situation for him. And Justin Fields can learn from him if Justin Fields chooses to. And finally, Russell Wilson is the best fit for Arthur Smith's play action style offense, and they want to emphasize that rushing attack. So great move by Mike Tomlin. We'll see if it was the right move long term. And Bill, The man who
Yeah.
is okay with taking somebody out. I got to watch my back when I'm around you now.
Oh man, you're twisting your words now. I'm gonna have to come back. We're gonna have to do a short on this. But the last thing I'll say is,
I'm a former politician. You know that, yeah.
listen, when I played, who I didn't care if it was a friend of mine on the other team. He's my enemy during the game, and I would do anything to win the game. And I'd want to hurt. When I hit people, I intended to hurt.
You heard that. You heard that. He would do anything.
Yeah, they didn't have to pay me. I didn't like anything. Yeah, that's the way it was. But for Russell Wilson, just stay with your days when you were at Wisconsin. Play action, run, and great defense.
Exactly. There you have it, folks. There you have it. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. Do not forget, share, like, and most importantly, subscribe to this podcast, Points on the Board. You can find this podcast, my other podcast, Red, White, and Rude. I'm going to have Bill on as a special guest here sooner than later to tell a great story. And there's also our pure play basketball and football shows. If you don't want no politics, just sports, we have a libertarian show, and we have my conservative talk show, Fired Up, with Bill's lovely wife, Annette Ross. So you can find this podcast at grumblingsmedia.com with the rest of our library of podcasts, as well as our social media platforms, YouTube, Rumble, Apple, Pandora, and Spotify. I am William Del Pilar, and for Bill Ross and Points on the Board, until next time, we bid you adieu.
Hey everybody, this is Big John from Grumblings Media, and I just want to say thank you for watching our content. If you want to support our efforts here at Grumblings Media, just smash the subscribe button right here, totally free, or just go ahead and consume more of our great content. Click either one of these two boxes.